I didn't enter Islam through Ahmadiyya. I actually embraced Islam as such through Salafism, because during my time of searching Islam, looking at Islam, I made many Muslim friends. Some were Salafi, some were Sufi, some were Shia. And I used to go to Sufi mosques just to observe, just to look. That's why I have a passion for these type of topis. I had the privilege, I would say I had the privilege of meeting and seeing Sheikh Nazim, who was a Sufi Sheikh. I don't know if Imam Atal knows about him, or I'm sure you must do. He was on the island of Cyprus. And he had many converts, Irish converts into Sufism. So I was mixing with all type of different people. I don't mean this in a derogatory way or a bad way. I even sat amongst Shias as well. But the ones who really I liked at the time was Salafism, because of their discipline of Islam, of their strictness towards the Sunnah, the dress sense, and of course, alhamdulillah, the beard. All these things I liked. But then, of course, the more I got into it, the more I investigated this area. My inner peace wasn't disturbed, but I was very kind of taken back by the differences within Islam. I remember being amongst friends and hearing the word for the first time, kafir. And I was asking, what is kafir? Now, when they use the word kafir, it's not like they're saying disbeliever. Some of them say kafir in a really insulting way. And they were talking about Shia friends of mine. When someone said to me, why you bring this kafir here and I didn't know what kafir was, and then he told me, and I said to him, why are you calling him, why are you being so rude? He said, no, because Shia kafir, brother, they're kafir, they're not Muslim. And then when I asked about Sufism, and they went, astaghfirullah, they're worse. And so forth, this went on. And then my friend who was a Salafi introduced me to Salafism. And when I went to his wedding in Leicester, I've mentioned this in other narratives and other stories, but and then there was a massive discussion in that wedding amongst young Muslims. I mean, I was one of the young people at that time there. And there was a big debate about the advent of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. And I sat there listening, and the debate was between two people, but surrounded by so many. And the person who was promoting the physical descent of Jesus was none other than but he is the current mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. He was there, and he was debating with some other person, telling him that this is the understanding of this hadith, and that Jesus himself will physically come back. When the other person responded and explained that the hadith meant not the physical of the descent of Jesus himself, but rather someone else will come, and that Muslims were not going to go around breaking crosses and killing pigs, and it meant that he would come and remove the misconceptions and break the doctrine of Trinity and reform society. That made sense to me. And I remember saying and seeking permission if I could make a comment, and they allowed me. And I said to Brother Sadiq Khan that what you just said made no sense. It's illogical, irrational. But what he said, the person on the right said, makes absolute sense. So, I have to be careful now because we're recorded. Sadiq Khan Saab took me to the side and rebuked me and asked me had I converted and was I a Muslim, and I told him that I had not taken the Shahada, but yes, I in my heart I'm a Muslim. But he rebuked me and said, never say this in front of me again, and these people or that person over there is not a Muslim, he's Kafir and he is Qadiani. So of course I went to this brother and said, what is Qadiani? And he went, I am not Qadiani. And I said, no, I've been told you're Qadiani, so what is Qadiani? He said, I'm not Qadiani, I'm Ahmadi. So then he explained what Ahmadiyyat was. And then when he said that Jesus is not coming back, but someone else is coming back, that Jesus didn't die on the cross, he survived the cross, and Jesus actually died a natural death. Again, then I laughed at him and I said, no, you know, you were once talking sense, now you're talking absolute nonsense. So after the wedding finished, he presented me. He asked me would I take some books from him, and I said yes. And he gave me a book called Tomb of Jesus. And I read that book. I went back Leicester down to London, and I read that book, and I was absolutely gobsmacked because it presents all the biblical evidence. I was gobsmacked at the possibility of this being true. And the references that were presented in that book, they're absolutely 100%. But of course I didn't join Ahmadiyya there and then. I contacted that person and he gave me, the second book was Where Did Jesus Die? And then after a few more months, when I read that book, I've always used this expression, by the way, that book basically crucified me. Like, it literally finished off any possibility of any argument I could consider, because not only did it present evidence, it presented evidence in a logical, rational, feasible way. It was a possibility. This went on for about a year or more, and then he presented me a third book called Jesus in India. And as I mentioned earlier on, I love history. That's why I specialized in biblical theology and historical theology and church history. So historically, the book Where Did Jesus Die was absolutely 100% a possibility. And I couldn't default the possibility, because the Messiah al-Islam presented such strong arguments in his book historically. I checked them all out as well, and they were all historically accurate. So that was kind of my journey into Ahmadiyya. I didn't accept it. I mean, into it means look at it, look around it, see what was being presented. It was actually when I was invited to Jalsa Salana in 1990. And I only went because the guy was so nice to me, so kind, and like, well, how could I refuse him? And I went on a Friday, and we arrived just before what was the Jummah, and then after the Jummah, he put me into the marquee. I've told this story 1,000 times, but he put me into the marquee, sat me on my own and said, well, he sat me amongst other converts, not converts, but other European English people. And he said that he had to go and do some work in the bazaar. I know that was at the time. And I asked him that, well, hang on, you brought me here to see your spiritual leader, and you can't sit here and listen to it? And he went, brother, I'm very weak. And I, wow, right? Plus he liked to smoke. That was probably the real reason, right? Anyhow, I'm Irish. I'm going to be very frank. I'm not going to mix my words, right? Anyhow, I was sitting there and for some time, maybe 20, 30 minutes, trying to look around, and I did engage some other guests who were also there for the same reason. And, you know, as I mentioned before, when suddenly everyone started jumping up in the air, raising their hands, saying, Nada Takbir, Allah Akbar, I was literally saying to myself, where am I? What did I come to? And these people look crazy, right? And even the other guests that were around me, they were all looking at me saying, and I said, I know, right? But when everything calmed down and I saw this entourage of people going up on stage, and this what can only be described as a magnificent looking man wearing white and turban and going to the stage, and then the afternoon session started. And there was a big television screen in front of me in those days, the old television screens. And I could see him, I could see his face. And I've said this story 10 times, and his speech was so profound, and it had such a profound effect upon me, in that I've never seen a leader ever rebuke his own community. I've never seen a leader tell his community, which I now know to mean Ahmadiyyat, right? Telling them off. It was amazing. I remember seeing a priest give a big lecture in a church, the Catholic priest, about the evils of alcohol and how you shouldn't get involved in the evils of alcohol. And I remember that day I was impressed until I went across to the pub with my father and the priest was drinking a pint of Guinness. Right? But this distinguished gentleman was lovingly reminding his community about being moral, about being ethics, about having principles, and acting upon the teachings of Islam. I was absolutely impressed. So much so, I wanted to see him, I wanted to meet him, and I tried on my way knocking over Imam Rashid, and realizing that you can't get through all those bodyguards, and asking why, and the Imam Sahib and the bodyguards looked at me as if to say, well, you can try if you want, right? But you're not getting through. So Imam Sahib, that great Imam Sahib, Imam Atul Rashid Sahib, Imam of London Mosque, said to me, come back the next day and I will take you to the question session. I personally will bring you. I came back. I was sat right in the front, and I still never forget the first time I saw Hazrat Khalifa Rahmatullah. I mean, first really seeing him. I was literally 3 foot from him, 4 foot from him on a chair. And the more he spoke, the more he explained. There were Sikhs, there were Jews, there were Christians, there were Hindus, there were Muslims, there were atheists, everybody was there. And I've never seen a man able to answer as he answered. Meticulously, intellectually, spiritually annihilating every question that came into him, and profoundly proving the divine reality which I accepted, which was Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much so that when Huzur was, after 1 or 2 hours of answering questions, when he got up to leave, he looked me straight in the eyes. And all I can say to you is that I fell in love with him. And after that, I don't know if Imam Al-Qadr remembers when brother Mackenzie, I forgot his first name now, but he was a Scottish convert, Yahya Mackenzie. But he was there also, and when everyone was going for the meal and the dinner, and I was standing still for what felt like forever, trying to observe what I heard, and the fact that Huzur looked at me, and the inner peace that I felt when he looked at me. And I just looked at him and said, "Are you an Ahmadi? Do you belong to this community?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "How do I join this community?" And he said, you want to become an Ahmadi?" I said, "Yes." "Now? Right now?" I said, "Yes." "How do I join?" He said, wait 1 second. And he ran off. After 10 minutes, came back with a bail form. He said, "You have to fill this out and sign it." But when this was presented to Imam Sahib on site, apparently Imam Sahib said, "No, tell him to come and see me on after the Jalsa." After the Jalsa, I went to see Imam Sahib in his home in near Fazl Mosque. And Imam Sahib asked me one question: "Do you fully understand who Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is? Do you understand who he was and what he is?" I said, "Yes, of course, he's the founder of this community." He said, "No, do you understand that he is that Messiah, that person which was to come?" And I said, "Yeah, I understand, yeah." But he wasn't obviously convinced. He said to me, "Wait here." Imam Sahib came back with a bag, 2 bags actually, full of books, and said to me, "I want you to read these books." So I said to Imam Sahib, "Okay, but I want to join." And he said, "No, you read these books first." And then I informed Imam Sahib that I'm going back to Ireland, which was my plan. He said, "That's okay, we have a Jamaat in Ireland." I left Imam Sahib's office with carrying these 2 heavy bags, and I went across to Fazl Masjid because I wanted to see it. And then I met the great Imam, the great missionary, Maulana Bashir Orchard Ahmad Sahib. And he saw me actually looking dejected. He saw me with these 2 big bags. And I told him what Imam Sahib said to me, and he said, "Okay, this is my advice to you. You can take a long time and read those books, or you can take the low road and pray." That was his advice to me. And he gave me a beautiful smile and walked off. I went back to Ireland. It's a long story. I don't have to go through the whole incident of Ireland, but I went back to Ireland, had to convince my parents I wanted to be a Muslim. That's another story in itself. But because the pressure was on me from my family, my parents, my grandparents, my brothers, my sisters, priests, everyone, I took the advice of Maulana Bashir Orchard Sahib and put the John Namaz down. I didn't know the prayers at the time. I put the John Namaz down, put the Bible on the mantelpiece and the Quran, and I said these words from my Testament. I said, I know, oh God, you exist. That I am certain of. I also know that Satan is not more powerful than you. And I also believe and know that it is impossible for Satan to get to me before you. So which of these two people should I follow? I was asking two questions. Should I follow Prophet Muhammad? I'm saying this because the pressure was being put onto me by my parents. Okay? Which of these two people should I follow? Because I believe in both of them. Prophet Muhammad or Jesus? Which of these two should I follow? Which of these two is that ultimate divine truth? Even though I believed, but because my parents are putting me under pressure, I was asking this question. And then I said to God, Na'uzubillah, if you don't answer me, then you cannot hold me accountable on the Day of Judgment. I will hold you accountable on the Day of Judgment. Within a few hours, I fell asleep. I saw this dream that I was sitting in a church, a beautiful Roman Catholic church, full of Roman Catholic worshippers. And I stood up, I turned to the east, I went Allahu Akbar, and I fell in sajda. Several others stood up, went Allahu Akbar, turned to the east, went Allahu Akbar, and fell in sajda, and then they followed me in the dream after that. Within 3 days of this dream, I knew what this dream told me. I knew the answer. Changing direction of worship towards Khana Kaaba. Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. Falling in sajda, submit to the will of Allah. I knew. So I left the house I was living in, went to see my parents, told my parents I'm going back to London. My mother was crying and weeping, and literally, when the taxi came to pick me up, she hung onto my knees. She scraped all her knees full of blood. My tears were in my father's eyes. And I said to my father, I looked into my father's eyes and I said, Dad, if I don't go, I'm going to die a spiritual death. I have to go. And I narrated, my dad is well versed. I told you earlier, my family are devout Catholics. My father is well versed in Bible. I told my father, Jesus said, be careful where you throw the seeds. If they fall between the rocks, the sun won't get to them and they will die. If you throw them amongst the weeds will destroy them. So I told my father, if I stay here, I will die. I have to go to London to get life. So I got in the taxi, went to London. Within 3 or 4 days, settled in London. I went straight down to Imam's office or his house, knocked on his door, told him the dream. Then he said, you can sign the birth form. But it didn't end there. This is the amazing thing. It didn't end there. I was absolutely in peace. I cannot describe the peacefulness that was in my heart of finding that ultimate peace, that ultimate divine reality. But one day I was in Tooting, and Atan Sahib knows very well, Imam Sahib knows Tooting very well. We're full of mullahs and mosques, and I met some of my old Muslim friends, and they said to me, "Where have you been? We have not seen you." And I said, "Alhamdulillah, I should inform you that I became a Muslim." And they were all so happy with me, saying, "Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar," right? And I was standing near the bottom mosque in Tooting. And then one brother with a long beard said to me, "Akhi, I don't see you in the mosque. I don't see you on Jummah. So which mosque do you pray in?" So I said, "I go to London Mosque." And he says, "You mean Regent's Park Mosque?" I said, No. London Mosque in Southfields. And he went, "Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Qadiani Mosque?" He said, No, Akhi, listen, they're not Muslims. They're kafir. No, they have done mesmerism, they have done magic on you. They have put something in your teeth. So I'm looking for the book here. I have the book here. He presented to me a book. He said, "Wait here." He came back with a book called An Analytical Study of Qadianism, written by a Salafi. He said, "Promise me you'll read it." Actually, the book is in my cupboard over there. He said, "Promise me you'll read it." I said, "Inshallah, I will read it." So I took it home. I wanted to be honest and fair. I decided I should read it. I read the first chapter. It was so filthy in language towards the Jama'at, towards Hazrat Masih al-Islam. It was so full of, even if it was true, but it wasn't, but even if it was true, the language that they were using was absolutely unethical. So much so that I, being an Irishman, that I took my John Namaz, I put the John Namaz on the ground, and I took, if this is the book, and I slammed the book on the ground. I fell in sajda, and I said to Allah, "Oh Allah, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to read such nonsense. So, if Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad al-Qadian is the Mahdi and the Messiah, then I want to see him." That night, I saw Hazrat Masih al-Islam. And Hazrat Masih al-Islam said to me, he said, "Islam is Ahmadiyyat, and Ahmadiyyat is Islam. There's no difference between them." And he said to me, "If ever you're in doubt again, pray in this position." And I saw Hazrat Masih al-Islam falling in sajda. Then I woke up shaking to a brother. From that day, from that moment till this moment, I became a radical devout Ahmadi. I read every anti-Ahmadi book that I could get my hands on, and I went to every single mosque in London for 5 years. Every mosque I went to after that, every mosque, all the mosques in London, and some in the north, in Manchester and Birmingham. And I knocked on the door of every imam and said, prove to me that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is not the Mahdi. Even though I knew none of them could prove it to me. This, in a very short, is how I became an Ahmadi. Alhamdulillah.